Hello, hello, and welcome to Intersections. Today, it is just me. John Ko is out taking care of business. We're going to miss him, but you will see him. We will see him next week. John, we're thinking about you today. So I'm so excited about today's guest because they're actually, look, I mean, I'm excited about every week's guest, but I've been doing a lot of work with these guys for a while now. And my first guest in particular, we just had an article come out in CIO yesterday. It's Change by Design and the role that software plays in digital transformation. And I've seen it all over Twitter. So clearly we struck a chord, which is fantastic. So I won't just kind of beat around the bush here. I'll just dive right in. I'm thankful that you're here with us. We're thankful every week that you join us. Please spread the word. Please engage with us in every way possible. If you want to see past episodes, you can go to intersectionslive.com. But right here, right now, we want to hear from you. So please share where you're tuning in from. I love to see where we have people all around the world who are part of the Intersections community. Please share your observations. I will share them on screen. Please share your questions for our guests and also any ideas or recommendations that you want to share. So with that, I will formally introduce the show. Welcome to Intersections, a weekly conversational jam session that dives deep into the intersections among technology, innovation, culture, and ideas. We bring diverse personalities and worldviews together in the service of greater understanding and unlearning. I think in this world where technically, even though it's 2021, we're making decisions now as if it was 2026, 2027. There's no playbook for this time. I don't know about you, but I didn't have my pandemic and post-pandemic playbook at the ready. So we're literally writing it as we go. And that's what this show is about. It's about inventing. It's about creativity. It's about exploring art and artistry. It's about exploring the social sciences. It's about exploring technology and innovation in ways to create new opportunities, to introduce new value, to invent when that playbook doesn't exist. And that's what's so exciting about right now. And so I would like to bring up our first guest, which is somebody that I admire. His name is Dr. Mick Kersten. And Dr. Mick, is the CEO of TaskTop. He's the founder of TaskTop, and he's also the best-selling author of Project to Product, How to Survive and Thrive in the Age of Digital Disruption with the Flow framework. And Dr. Mick, this is the first time that I'm seeing you actually in the office. All the work that we've been doing together over the last year has been, basically remote. So it's good to see you back at work.
It's great to be here. It's great to be joining you here today, Brian.
Oh, of course. I would encourage everyone, if you have a minute, and I'll try to find it, or maybe Gregarious, if you're listening backstage, to put that link of CIO, our latest article. This is our second or our third piece together, but we've also done several events together, several podcasts together, and every single time the conversation is amazing. So, Mick, let me throw it over to you for a moment to introduce yourself and some of the things that have you so inspired right now.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So I think that one of the things that has me most inspired right now, at least the past couple of weeks, is the word that you just used of unlearning. And I've been on this journey for the past couple of years, having published the Project to Product book to help traditional organizations and enterprises drive the kind of innovation that we've seen from startups, from open source, from tech giants and unicorns, and really understanding the mismatch between the ways of working and ways of managing teams and creativity and projects and what actually is required for innovation. So I had just last week, that's the same podcast that you and I did, the Project to Product podcast. I had Christian Idiotti from the Silicon Valley Product Group, and he said there was just this amazing story that he told, because he said he was doing his MBA where people are being taught playbooks for how to manage, how to innovate, how to grow organizations and deliver value to customers and to markets. And at the same time, he was responsible for innovation within a large organization. And he realized that these things were so fundamentally misaligned. Is that what he was learning in the MBA and what was required for his, at that time, day job, that he had to undertake this massive activity of unlearning everything that he was actually learning to try and graduate. And that's what I've been thinking about a lot lately, because as you said, the pandemic took us to this place where there was no playbook. And I think it put this for the business and technology leaders that I work with, so executives driving digital transformations and innovation agendas, I think it really exacerbated this need for understanding how to manage and with this much chaos, with this much uncertainty, and how much the old models and the things that were learned during MBAs, during previous phases of their careers, no longer applied. So yeah, just a fascinating topic.
Wow, I mean, I had a bridge of which I was going to start with, but that point is so important. First of all, thank you everyone for sharing where you're tuning in from. It's fantastic. I mean, all over the world already. Please keep sharing where you're tuning in from, and also share your questions. So, Dr. Mick, when it comes to unlearning, and when it comes to skill sets that are going to be necessary in this new world, I'm going to make this sort of a two-part question. The first part of the question is, as you and I have discussed numerous times, the future of digital transformation isn't what it used to be. And that's a wonderful thing. I think we place too much emphasis on digital and not enough emphasis on desired outcomes that were beneficial to markets and beneficial to the business as a result of being beneficial to markets, sort of giving that transformation purpose. So the first question is, what is it that businesses are still not necessarily getting right about that transformation? Okay, and I'm going to give everybody credit. You all changed overnight to support remote work, to support e-commerce, to develop apps, and everything necessary to be able to get that change going. You embraced automation, RPA. Yes, you've learned that you can do things faster than you ever thought possible. But now we're going into this new phase of the post-pandemic economy. And so there are things that we have to do that we're not exploring. So instead of breaking it into two questions, I'll just start with the first one, Dr. Mick. What is it that leaders need to think about that they might not necessarily be talking about right now or prioritizing right now?
Yeah, so I think the leaders, the way that we have of managing our strategies, our plans, our basically the business from quarter to quarter, have become very mature in terms of how we look at sales and marketing, how we look at significant portions of the business, how we look at even people operations and HR and the like. And the thing that I think is still just woefully behind is how we actually manage R&D and technology investment and digital and software. And so while we have all these great ways of measuring value delivered and measuring outcomes, so business leaders who've thrived through the pandemic know exactly how much the revenues went up or down, what happened to their customer retention, what happens to some of their sales statistics, what happens to some of their to their marketing funnel and their pipeline and the like. But what I'm seeing is that prior to the pandemic, during the pandemic, and then after the pandemic, it's still unclear whether what happened when people shifted work from home. Did innovation increase? Did the amount of value that was delivered to the customers and to the market increase? Did it decrease? Is it going to get better as people shift into the office or different modes of flexible work? So I think we've got two big challenges for today's leaders as we shift to this post-pandemic world. And one of them is that there's the ways of measuring value and of measuring delivery that are being adapted from previous ways of working, from manufacturing, from basically scientific management, and from treating people like cogs in a machine. We already know don't apply, because the companies who actually focus on innovation, focus on teams, focus on autonomy have done much better through the pandemic than those who haven't, and we're much quicker to adapt. However, we still have old ways of doing project management and trying to basically manage innovation as a set of activities that are thrown over the fence to technology teams without a proper feedback loop and without proper buy-in, without proper understanding of the customer and of the product that's being delivered. So I think one problem is that organizations are using dated measurement and management models that simply don't work. And they got in the way through the pandemic, and they're going to slow things down even further and allow others to pull further ahead. Then the other thing is, I think that we need a way of measuring value. We need a way of understanding are the things that we're doing for our teams, for our staff, for our offices, for remote work, are they helping or are they hindering innovation? And so the key thing there is, I think, we need to understand how to manage the flow of creative work, of delivering software, of innovating for customers. And that's again where some organizations have pulled ahead, and they've put ways of managing products and value streams and flow in place, and others haven't. And so I think that those are the two key things: is we have to stop using these dated management models of, I don't know, MBOs and basically throwing work over the fence and tracking activities. And we have to stop actually, this is an interesting one I've learned recently, Brian, is just that I've been doing objectives and key results, right? Something that a lot of companies have been doing for years. At TaskUp, it's our 9th year now of sending OKRs. I'm seeing OKRs used in large enterprises as a way to impose waterfall processes on top of agile teams, right? So we have to stop misusing the things that are meant to work and help us innovate and drive innovation. And then fundamentally, I think we need a better way. We need to get as scientific and deliberate at managing innovation as we have at other business functions, like sales, like marketing.
Man, yes. It felt like I was in church for a second there. So let's talk about the flow framework. Let's talk about different ways of thinking about work. But before we get there, I think one of the challenges that I'd love to see addressed, and also I'd love to hear your thoughts about, you have all of this work that's being done from processes that were invented when paper was still the most popular medium.
Yeah.
And so we're digitizing these archaic ways of working. We're not giving ourselves the space and time to ask questions like, if I had to create this process, or if I had to create this app today or 2026 to do this outcome or deliver against this result, what would I do? What would the digital first approach be, rather than trying to adapt things that exist and force it into this future? So how can we start by digitizing the new versus the old, and then how does that work? How should we approach that work?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. I think it's not an easy question for a lot of large organizations, right? Because they've got so much of the old, they want to move into the new, right? Everyone wants to become more innovative. Everyone wants to win their market. Everyone wants to do great things for their customers. So I'll just tell you another quick story that I found really inspirational from TUI Group. So I think the world's largest end-to-end travel agency. And they were faced with this dilemma. So I was working with them. This was around May, where everything was going very poorly. But for them, of course, because they have a whole lot of cruise ships, planes, and hotel rooms. So this was not a great time business-wise. And they took that opportunity. And this was right around the time that we were speaking about this, Brian, is how our organization is going to thrive through this. So I think they took a lot of what you said to heart. They took a lot of the principles behind innovation, behind cloud, behind flow. And shifting from project to product. So basically creating these more autonomous, more empowered value streams, and in the end, creating a digital platform. So they were not stuck, even though they had a whole lot of assets they were managing. They actually re-envisioned the company as a digital company. And they used the pause that came from COVID in their business to actually create a technology platform in the cloud that's now running more than half of the revenue. Across multiple regions. So what we saw is that I think some organizations are basically taking this approach of the disruption that's happened to accelerate how quickly they transform and how quickly they build out the new. Because to do this, they actually have to then go and shut down data centers, shut down old Oracle databases, and bring those different regions across the entire planet onto this new digital platform, and actually bring this new way of managing innovation by not throwing activities over to technology teams, but actually measuring flow and getting impediments and bottlenecks out of the way of those teams as they move to those new platforms, realizing that, of course, they actually had to upskill staff who'd never deployed to cloud before in their case. And of course, you might have different technology stacks that are relevant to you, be it RPA, be it AI. In their case, a really big part of it here was the shift to cloud. But what's, I think, amazing to me is that now is the opportunity to just lean into the net new. And of course, you have to do right by the customers on the legacy, but they had to have CEO level discussions to actually say, okay, well, you're not going to get every single customization in your travel and booking options that you had specific to this region and this part of the world for this season, because we're actually becoming a digital platform. And we're going to use this both at a team and technology level, but at a business level to change what we bring to market and to have it be digital and first, and to become a technology platform that happens to manage a whole bunch of assets. So that was amazing to me, right? Because this was not a new Expedia that was created. This was actually a transformation of an existing business and a very old business. And the amount of innovation that's resulted has been amazing. So I think my big lesson is, pre-pandemic, I was thinking more, okay, it's going to be more incremental from the TUI group and from Peter Jordan, the CTO there who led this. And you can learn more I interviewed him on the Project the Product podcast as well. He tells the story very eloquently. I think the lesson is just, I don't know what you think about this, Brian. My view is just lean way harder into the net new than you did before. It's really hard if the transformation is only happening from the office of the CTO, the CIO. You have to get the CEO's buy-in, because you're going to hit brick walls where you've got, different general managers in different parts of the business that like the old way of doing things. That's simply, those have to be disrupted, or you'll be disrupted as a result, which is what, of course, CIOs and boards are increasingly realizing. So it's just use this opportunity to build more net new, and then shift more of your business onto those net new platforms.
You've been a leader in doing this and inventing ways to do this for a really long time, and I think there's the way of doing it, and then there's the sort of the prelude to doing these things. And I'd love to hear your experience. So let's just talk to those technology leaders right now as human beings. So, in fact, after this show today, I'm going to be working on an article that translates some recent Salesforce data that shows that CIOs are just more chaotic than they've ever been in terms of their workloads, the priorities that they're faced with in terms of fixing things, adapting things, and then also being tasked with, for example, Dr. Mick, like you were sharing here, with innovation on creating new value. All of this, to use that overused analogy of, fixing the plane while it's flying.
Mm-hmm.
So where do they start? I mean, how do you prioritize? I mean, when everything's a priority, how do you prioritize the work of the iteration stuff versus the innovation? And do you need to create new roles, hire new staff with new skill sets? What are some of the best practices that you're helping to create?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I'll just start it. So that'll be fascinating to see that, Brian, is the data that you gather from the conclusions you gather from that. I'll tell you, in terms of our data that we're gathering through our the TaskTop products collect value stream data. So we actually see how quickly things are flowing. What's sort of the average time to value for delivering new features across our customer base. And the biggest learning that we've had over the last 12 months is, in terms of flow, is that the biggest impediment to flow, to getting product and innovation and features to market, is too much work in progress. So too much overload. So the same overload you're seeing on CIOs, it's passing on to the teams. And it's at the point right now where these teams, they had pre-pandemic backlogs that were too big. Then with the pandemic, so much shifted. Those backlogs grew even larger. And as we see the flow, what we call the flow load, so as we see the work in progress grow, the teams become less and less productive because they thrash more and more. They have more meetings, more conversations, more approvals. And it just grinds productivity to a halt. Actually, one bank that we worked with, they saw their flow efficiency, which is just basically how quickly things are flowing. Imagine how quickly boats are going through the Suez Canal. They saw their flow efficiency go down to 1%.
Wow.
So 99% of effort was being wasted post-pandemic because they overloaded the team so much with this need to shift. And that was just a fascinating moment, right? Where we saw, and there's all sorts of different data sets. We're just one of them. You've got some key data there from Salesforce, where you saw some companies that were able to shift very quickly, who were able to reprioritize, and some that just dumped all this work onto the teams and things ground to a halt because the teams were completely overloaded. None of the old priorities were removed. So I think the best practice here is, And this is not easy, right? This again involves the business. Oftentimes, the most successful transformations of the sort during the pandemic, I think this has been another fascinating for me. The CEO was involved at some level, and maybe it was their chief of staff, but there was some business level involvement because things that were critical to customers had to get deprioritized. Things that were critical to certain parts of the business, certain lines of business, had to get deprioritized. And when they did, of course, the teams had a chance to deliver, and had a chance to deliver on what were the most important initiatives that came from all that frequent planning that was happening during the pandemic. So I think now in terms of best practices, I think the key thing is, it really depends on the business. But I think some of what we saw I still go back to Jeffrey Moore's Zone to Win, and the way that Salesforce and Microsoft applied that, the way I applied that at TaskDoc, right, is that we need a way, first of all, of sunsetting that legacy. I thought that was just such a brilliant way that he put it at the end of that book, where you need to put a senior executive in charge of killing products and services and legacy. Right, that's the only way you'll shift off, and then you need to create these incubation and transformation zones, and lean hard into, as we saw with 2U Group, into this transformation zone that's not going to look great on the top line initially, but it's where the company's headed. And you basically get all the blockers out of the way of that, get all the bottlenecks out of the way of that, while of course making sure that there's still enough resources going into the rest of your portfolio. So to really understand what your digital portfolio is, to allocate resources, not just to meeting the demands of the past, but to lean into the future.
Wow. That, yes, I really appreciate everything that you just shared. And with the few minutes that we have left, because we could probably talk all day, I'll just set this up. One of the other reports that we published late last year explored the future of work and some of the top skill sets that were going to be necessary to invent for this new post-pandemic economy were dubbed soft skills, which I would argue are hard human skills like empathy, creativity, critical thinking, thought leadership, storytelling was up there. And I could see, for example, the storytelling, taking what you're saying, the narrative inside of the organization to get buy-in and create alignment with people who have a whole different set of priorities, like shareholder, quarter-to-quarter performance, stakeholders. But if we're truly to become customer-centered, if we're truly to become innovative, if we're truly to become agile in its truest sense, models have to adapt, ways of working have to adapt. But what would you say are the skill sets that we either reskill existing employees for or net new talent that we need to attract? What should we start thinking about?
Yeah, I think there's a great comment. Is it can't just be thinking about increasing productivity and again thinking of innovation and software and digital as manufacturing, because they're not. It's completely different than manufacturing. It's creative, and so I think that we're already seeing, I think, a lot of understanding at the team level, at the agile team level of this, right? And you've got things like innovation games, and you bring that creativity in, and a lot of that actually has to come from the teams themselves, as they have to just have the space given to them to actually put in place the things that support innovation. So one of the most important things I think at a leadership level that has to happen is to actually to give the teams that space. So one thing that we do is that at the end of every release cycle, we have all these agile sprints. We do a jog week where the teams structure all of their time, figure out what can they do to help to create some new innovation, to prove something out. They have a week to create these demos that might help themselves, help the customer, help their colleagues. So I think the teams need the space and the space for the free thinking, the innovation within their day-to-day work and for that continuous improvement. And I think the key thing is that the executives need to get involved, right? Because the creativity can't just come from the teams. In the end, there has to be a feedback loop. And one of the most promising things that I've seen over the course of the past year is when their master classes in product thinking and innovation and flow in technologies like cloud and RPA and a lot of these things that you've been pointing people to, Brian, where the executives are also taking a portion of their capacity to learn and to actually be creative. And then again, because in the end, it's about establishing this feedback loop with the market that involves both the teams knowing how to get feedback from the market, and all of that flowing back into the organization and the strategy. So that space to learn and to grow, I think it just has to be part of the day-to-day planning and capacity rather than thinking it's something people will do on weekends.
or at all, right?
Or at all.
Yeah, which is fantastic.
I have to do it on weekends. But
hey, so Dr. Mick, where's your office?
Vancouver, Canada.
Oh man, that that's been on my list of places to live for many years. A friend of mine, Deb Landa, and I used to do a conference out there called Grow.
Yeah,
and
right.
And I looked forward, as hard as the work was, I looked forward to visiting Vancouver. And also we always did some events as part of the greater event at Whistler. And so I absolutely miss all of that stuff. Dr. Mick, thank you as always. It's I value our time together. I look forward to doing something again sooner than later. Thank you for sharing your insights.
I do as well. Thanks so much, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Oh man. Wow. All right. Well, hey, just to keep rocking and rolling, our next guests are backstage right now. So I'm going to introduce them and then bring them into the stream. Wagner James Au and Rohan Freeman. This is going to be a really interesting conversation, and we're going to try to do a demo here live. And to be honest with you and fully transparent, it's the first time we will have done something other than screen sharing. So we'll see how this goes. And Gregarious, if you're back there, we might need some technical support. I'm just setting the stage. It might go smoothly. We'll see. But I also want to thank you for all of the great comments and observations that you're sharing. I mean, it's just great stuff. I'm trying to get to all of it. Also, thank you for sharing where you're tuning in from. And quite honestly, thank you for tuning in. So let me just give a quick introduction. Wagner James Au is someone whom I've known going back to the early Web 2.0 startup days. He's the author of The Making of Second Life, Game Design Secrets, and New World Notes, the longest running, most read news and culture blog devoted to VR and virtual worlds. Actually, Wagner, one of the things that you and I should talk about after this is this concept that I'm working on around spatial, taking these ideas of video game design and virtual world design and applying it to customer experience design or experience design for hybrid physical and digital worlds for businesses. And then also Rohan Freeman, he's the CEO of Sinewave. Before founding Sinewave Entertainment, he was the director of Europe's largest film finance company, Ingenious Media. So this is going to be really a fascinating conversation, and I'm going to click some buttons here and bring everybody on. Hey, Rohan. Hey, James. How are you?
Hey, how's it going, Brian?
Hey.
It's going great. Thank you for joining us.
It's good.
Yep, you're coming in great. Rohan, I have to say, you might have the first bookshelf that's empty that I have seen in this virtual world.
I know it's normally full of books that make me look much more intelligent than I am. I'm actually in the process of relocating. We're moving from London to Copenhagen at the moment, and so I'm busy packing. So it looks a little threadbare behind me. I apologize for that.
Oh, Copenhagen. I love that city. In fact, right before the pandemic, I had the opportunity to speak there 3 times in the same year, and I was just dreaming about it the other day. Well, congratulations on that. So let's jump right in. Rohan, why don't we talk about Sinewave Entertainment? We'll start there. James, I have a series of questions for you as well, but let's start with what Sinewave Entertainment is all about.
Yeah, sure. So I set the company up about 15 years ago. We build virtual worlds, and we now have a platform that our customers also use to build virtual worlds. Obviously, by virtual world, we mean lots of people in a 3D environment together in real time, interacting with each other with avatars, right, which are sort of usually a humanoid. I mean, you might have an avatar that's a fridge or a bat or something like that, but generally most people are humanoids. And they're doing things that might be playing games, but more often than not, it's other social activities, whether that's in a B2B or an education context or healthcare or, live music events, that kind of thing. Obviously, during COVID, we've had a massive demand for the event space. In a way, everything that happens in a virtual world is a live event, even if it's just 2 people meeting each other. But obviously, huge demand at the moment for conferences, exhibitions, classrooms, and our work has been trying to get that to run smoothly in the browser right? So that people don't have to have a nightmare getting in there. And really interesting challenge, kind of speaking to the stuff you were talking about in the first half of how we get virtual worlds to be a set of tools that a marketing manager or a PR manager or an event manager or an HR manager feel like they could actually pick those tools up and use them, which is an interesting challenge in itself.
Awesome. And James, tell us about you and your role and your work in this space, and then we'll kind of just dive into more questions.
Yeah, I guess we'd have to pull back to the time we met in the Web 2.0 era when I started with Linden Lab. I hadn't helped launch Second Life, and all the aspirations were there of making a metaverse. And I began as their embedded journalist, kind of writing about this world with or a platform really of user-generated content. And then one of the first people I met was ended up being the co-founder of Sine Wave with Rohan, and he was a bright, young, bushy-tailed entrepreneur who was making millions in Second Life. So I've been following this space as it's become more and more mainstream, and I was just looking at Matthew Ball's analysis where he mentioned the term metaverse kind of shot through the roof on Google Trends earlier this year, partly through the pandemic, partly through the Roblox IPO. But yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing is sort of helping usher in all of these metaverse concepts that we've been talking about for 15 years or so into the mainstream, which is happening now finally.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it took a pandemic to accelerate it into the mainstream. But I guess you could say that for almost every form of transformation and innovation that we're seeing, and I think it's fantastic. What is it though that you've documented in James? I'll start with you. What is it that you've documented in the last? Gosh, we've known each other 15, 16 years. The difference between Second Life then, for example, and VR, the metaverse now, what is it that we're now starting to see for the first time beyond the ways that we might traditionally have thought about VR, for example?
Yeah, well, I think kind of the main thing is just the mass market aspect of it. And I think people have not processed this, just how huge, for example, Roblox, it's pushing 200 million active users, and Fortnite, I think 25 or so million active users. And so there's this just large embrace, especially by Gen Y, with a 3D immersive experience as a platform, and then also using that to start having marketing applications, live music and events, and then actively thinking about these as marketplaces where people create content in the game space, but they also, there's an assumption that they can use it to sell the content. And Second Life was doing this on a smaller scale, like in 2005 or whatever, but now it's happening to the point where it's generated all these cottage industries, and kind of what's happening with TikTok, but it's happening kind of on this really highly engaged scale.
Yeah, don't get me started on TikTok. It's the one app that I've had to delete 6 or 7 times a month, and it finds its way back.
The algorithm.
The algorithm, man. Rohan, what are you seeing at in terms of trends that we might have had difficulty breaking into before? So, for example, I think we've seen some industries over the years, even before the pandemic, like events, concerts, try to break into whether it was VR or whether it was some form of AR. Like, for example, just last November 2019, I went to the Chainsmokers concert where they were beta testing live AR using the Verizon 5G network that was in the Chase Arena in San Francisco. They've been interesting. I don't know that they've been terribly effective in sort of replacing or augmenting, pun intended, that experience. But now I'm sure you're helping to build things that are really starting to gain traction and open up new worlds. And so I'd love to hear, what are some of those examples, some of those things you're seeing?
I think in terms of underlying trends, that the things that what I find observable is that clearly the the bits of the business landscape that COVID have decayed or broken down relate to human interpersonal relationships, right? And people's ability to build new bonds of trust, maintain existing bonds of trust, whether that's within a very specific commercial context, i.e., building the bonds of trust with your next clients and partners and things like that, or whether it's, an individual's dependence on work for an important part of their social life as well. And so seeing all of that sort of torn away and seeing the need for people to be able to have digital tools that allow them to do that, to create and invest in trusting relationships. It's been very interesting to see how that kind of, in a way, I suppose somewhat coincidentally, but it also sort of, it parallels a lot of the frustrations that wider society has had with the consequences of the current generation of social media and the way that it is structured, right? Facebook and Twitter, amazing platforms, have obviously achieved amazing success, but they've kind of found that the results of what they're doing often actually has the opposite effect, right? It can often erode trust and drive people into information silos where then there's a them somewhere else who they don't trust, and it sort of just emerges from the decontextualization and the way those algorithms work, right? And so virtual worlds are the opposite of that. They're all about how people can come together in a real-time environment and have conversations that have context, right? A virtual world is all about context. So seeing that wider frustration with the social implications of social media, combining with the decaying effect of the business development pipeline in enterprise and some of the HR functions, mental health functions that companies have a responsibility to preside over, they're both pushing in exactly the same direction. And the thing I've been most surprised seeing is the adoption of virtual world technology to solve that social challenge has often been within industries that we would not have expected to be early adopters, right? So investment banking and quite starchy bits of investment banking have bitten hard on the technology because they recognize they are absolutely dependent on personal relationships. And it really doesn't matter how, even if you're in a, really, really big bank in a high-end position, you've still got to kind of get out there and press the flesh. You don't really know where the next deal's coming from. There are some industries where you can sit in an ivory tower, like the buy side can sit in an ivory tower and wait for everyone to come to them. But most industries, both sides need to get out there and press the flesh. And it's very hard to do that on the internet. It's really, really hard to find ways to bump into people and to just have a little stop and chat or touch base with someone in an informal way. And it's been interesting to see how the people who absolutely need that will go straight past any reservations about, oh, this is a computer game, when they see that it does actually deliver that result.
Yeah, wow. That's actually a great application. I'm going to throw this question to you both, Rohan and then James. Maybe you could follow up, and then I want to jump into what we're going to talk about in terms of the demo. Facebook. I think Facebook, we could single them out in terms of digitizing what you were talking about there, which pressing the flesh, but digitally, I think they've been quite successful in taking networking and socializing that networking, and LinkedIn as well. But Facebook and its algorithm have really done an extraordinary job in digitizing some of these basic connectivity opportunities, creating groups, creating subnetworks, etc., creating niche works. But also, to your point, they've also been probably the most effective in eroding trust as a result of its algorithm. And it's ironic in that this is also one of the largest investors in virtual reality and augmented worlds, starting with this acquisition of Oculus and now exploring gaming, exploring social networking in virtual reality, and also now demonstrating that they believe the future of work is virtual. Not like this virtual, but like virtual, where every aspect of how they work is what they're going to see through a different lens. So how do we think differently than the way that Facebook's approached it from a social networking standpoint. How do we think differently about creating new types of opportunities where virtual and augmented reality become an entirely new way of engagement? And Rohan, I'll start with you.
Oh, well, go ahead.
Yeah, I think well, one of the key things, I mean, with any large institution that has built success with a particular business plan, and obviously Facebook has done that, it then becomes hard to kind of like kill the today's breadwinner in order to service tomorrow's breadwinner. And I think some of the challenges that established social media companies have, I mean, one example is just kind of like built-in assumptions about anonymity. So Facebook is very keen, and it's really understandable why, on kind of like people having, you know, real accounts and not lots of fake accounts and so on and so forth. Obviously, there's you know, that kind of speaks to a trust issue, and you can see why you would want to require people to, you know, prove who they are when they create their account and not have fake names and so on and so forth. It kind of makes sense at one level, but you've got to respect the way in which, you know, you've got to consider what the platform's there to do. And if the platform is there to help people maintain existing relationships, that's fine. But if it's going to be an icebreaker, if it's going to allow people to build new connections with each other, then the ability of the individual participating in some kind of social activity to decide how and when they disclose specific pieces of information about themselves, how they move from being anonymous to known, is a very, very sensitive and private and personal thing. You know, you might, you know, if you're on a date for the first time, then it's all about, you know, just choosing what do you disclose about yourself, what weaknesses do you disclose about yourself. You might end up being 25 years married to someone and still not have disclosed certain things about yourself, right? So allowing people to control how they de-anonymize themselves is something that a virtual world built to do that can do in lots of very elegant ways. But does the corporate policy of a company like Facebook prevent them from doing so? They can change their policies, of course, but that's an example of the kinds of shift in thinking that's needed.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
And James, over to you.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking maybe Facebook's corporate DNA may be resistant to the serendipity that makes virtual worlds so powerful. Facebook Horizons, that's their social VR platform. Haven't heard much from it yet, but the applications that are doing really well on the Oculus headset are Rec Room and VR Chat. And they're both social VR virtual worlds, very much in the kind of Second Life genus, or, you know, the family tree. Virtual worlds where you create content and you basically can meet anyone. And they're actually the killer app. This is not really appreciated much, but they are the most used products of VR. Rec Room has about 3 million users. A third of them use VR headsets, and VR Chat's probably over 1 million monthly actives, and most of them use VR. So and this is, to Rohan's point, it's very different from a Facebook schematic where there is an expectation of anonymity, and people can kind of create their identity and create a new identity and form new social groups. And it'll be people literally from all over the world that might have very little in common with each other in real life, at least in terms of race and age and so on. But there's a space finally where there's enough kind of serendipity and immersiveness where they can form new social bonds through creativity and imagination. And yeah, that's going to be a big challenge for companies like Facebook.
Yeah, because it's almost if we get down to the anthropology of it, in many ways, well, and also the design of it. Every network has had its form of persuasive design, and social engineering as a way of sort of changing behavior and rewarding that change in behavior over time. And I think we're going to have to see some of that in order to accelerate this in horizontal and vertical applications. I want to get to the demo that we're going to try to do here. So who's going to lead that conversation?
Cool.
Shall I share my screen? I can give you guys links as well to Jump In World if you want to. So let me just do that now. You might need an account.
Yeah, Rohan, if you want to put the links in private chat, I can drop them into the main thread here. That'll go out to everyone.
Copy world. There we go. So I'm going to, where is it? If I put it in the private chat there, so people can just create an account and have a look at the break room.
Would people watching the stream be able to jump in as well?
Yeah, I've just shared the link, and I'm going to share my screen.
And this could be shared to the your social channels too.
So I'm going to show. Hopefully, you can see my screen. Okay.
Not yet.
Is it coming up? It says it's sharing.
No.
Oh, let me try again. It says it was sharing. Hold on. Share screen, entire screen, share.
Okay, let's see.
Got it up there?
Okay, it's sharing. It's sharing your entire screen. So now there we go.
Great. Okay. So I'm showing you now this. So the key things. Look, this is shameless self-promotion, I'm afraid, but I'm the CEO of the tech company, and if you give me show me the rabbit, then I'll chase it. So what am I trying to show off here? So this is a fully immersive virtual world running in the browser. This is one of our most proud accomplishments. This is just Chrome here. The link I've given you, you register and you walk straight in. And what's really cool about that, particularly from an enterprise point of view, is IT departments don't have to install applications. Also, complex 3D worlds like this, they need some graphics processing power, right? And the average corporate Lenovo, where the drivers haven't been updated for 5 years, or worse still, the CEO who's on a Mac, right? Which looks really fancy and he thinks is powerful, but doesn't actually have a decent graphics card. Getting people into immersive worlds like this that look beautiful and run at 60 frames a second on corporate hardware is very difficult. So what we're doing here is the same as Google Stadia, right? So we're streaming the virtual world. So this is effectively a remote desktop that I've logged into, and that desktop is on a Google Cloud provider, but it happens to have an NVIDIA Tesla graphics card behind it, which is rendering the virtual world in the cloud. And then I am watching, even as I'm running around here and, clicking buttons to, let's say I take a seat at the boardroom and switch my camera on. My webcam is now in the world. All of this is being updated and rendered in the cloud and streamed back to me. And I can have 500 other people in this region with me, all interacting with each other, sharing presentations, sharing their screen, and nobody's doing anything locally on their hardware. So you can have people coming in on a Chromebook, coming in on a tablet or whatever, and still having the same AAA quality experience. For us, the goal is creating spaces where people will do exactly those networking things, where the boss maybe will come in and work the room, stop and chat over here, tell his terrible joke about golf, and then buzz off. Or where, if you're a salesman, maybe you see a VIP standing in front of this Kandinsky chatting to someone, and you just go and hover and wait until they finish their conversation, and then you get in there and you get your pitch away, and maybe that's your next client or your next boss or your next partner or whatever it may be. So everything we focus on is how do we make it accessible and easy for people to get in to a space where they can personalize themselves. I'll show you just some of our outfits that people can wear. You can just, you can see I've created hundreds of outfits here. Just load a slightly more sort of fantastical one here. You can see all my clothing loading. I've got about 500,000 assets on sale in the store. All of these clothing items, this glass skin was made by one of our content creators. These sunglasses, which you see I'm going to change, all made by third parties creating content on the platform, put on sale in our platform. So, the value of all of this is that people customize their look and feel, and suddenly they've got equity in the space. They've invested in their presence. And that means that that effort means something to other people. I've taken the time to go through the store and find a green pair of trainers and a green pair of sunglasses and this weird, cool glass skin. And it says something about me. And when you meet me, I'm representing myself. And when 30 people have all made the effort, and they're not all just sitting there in kind of like the default t-shirts and jeans you get given when you arrive, that is part of what helps build those bonds of trust. The fact that everybody's made an effort to turn up and represent themselves. And if you can encourage people to do that, start off by giving them tools like video conferencing and so on and so forth, which is useful as well, obviously, presentation skills. But in the end, it's when people bite on the avatar and they've represented themselves that suddenly all sorts of extraordinary social bonds start to emerge that wouldn't otherwise exist.
Wow, this is fantastic. I mean, this is approachable right now. What are some of the and James, I don't know if you want to add to that before I jump into the next question.
I just was thinking about the customization, and that's why Epic is making billions from Fortnite, is because it's free to play, but the players spend lots and lots of money customizing their character, and so. Well, first of all, it's a revenue stream, but secondly, that's going to be the expectation, for Gen Y as they go into the business world, that they'll have different ways of expressing themselves like that. You can take a similar experience, like what Rohan's doing now, kind of more of a kind of game world environment, but it could be, almost like an immersive Slack you can jump into.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. It's For me, what's really, really interesting about the opportunity that this wave of interest in the metaverse has brought, every technology needs its kind of like its community of early adopters, right? So with Facebook, it was the university community, right? They distribute it within universities first. Lots of other startups have sort of broken ground that way as well. And we're finding that the current wave of adopters into our technology are business people. But of course, they're people, right? They're human beings. They need extravagance. They need wide open vistas. They need science fiction as much as they need, just a box with a presentation in it. They need to be uplifted. And in the end, the tools that we're building that for the organizers, for the event managers, and I'll just show that very quickly here. This is kind of like the dashboard we're creating for pick the landing region where your users arrive, pick what avatars they can have, pick what, do you have the shop open or not? What content do you have available? So it's kind of like a world manager, a world configuration panel. What I'm observing is as we're growing this world management tool, which we originally built for conference managers organizing a B2B seminar or a workshop or something like that, and people organizing classrooms. But we can already see as we drop more and more sort of stunning regions in here, and it becomes possible to embed conference facilities in a space station or in, I'll go to another one of these regions that's really beautiful, a sort of French chateau region. Then essentially what we find ourselves doing is building the tools for a marketeer to use a virtual world. How does someone who is fundamentally a communicator, who has some kind of communication campaign, whether that's a B2B sales campaign that would normally be a conference, the annual industry conference, or it's an internal HR campaign for sort of engaging with your remote workforce, or it's consumer marketing, promoting a car showroom or whatever it may be, suddenly we're just starting to scratch the surface of what is the tool chain that a marketeer needs. What's the dashboard? What's the portal that a marketing director or a communications director needs in order to be able to use a virtual world in some kind of communications campaign?
Wow, this is just stunning. This is stunning. Actually, I mean, there's the richness, the immersion of this is it's kind of what I had wished Mist was back in the day. You had these gorgeous, lush
Totally.
landscapes, but you couldn't really get in there. And this is incredible. I also see this as, aside from just this application, the idea of world management or a world dashboard is how I think we should be thinking about everything these days. The experience, that's I've started working on this, and James, I'm going to follow up with you on this too. I started working on this piece that if you had to think about customer experience as designing in the metaverse, how would you approach it differently? And that dashboard that you just shared was really kind of really where I would start, is reimagining then the experience that people have as they experience it through their lens, through their avatar, so that you could design things to be much more efficient, gorgeous, and immersive. The other aspect I just want to ask before we run out of time here is, what are some of the features then that you're seeing from a design perspective that are going to encourage more engagement? So one of the things that, if you think about networking, as an introvert, that's so hard, is I don't know who to go up to and talk to in terms of meeting the right people. But I could see that in the digital world, there could be some, like with Twitter, I can see your bio, click some links, and know whether or not that you're someone I need to engage with. But how do you see the solving for that in the metaverse?
Well, we do have the same sort of array of, you can click on someone and see their profile. I don't know if I can click on myself. Actually, I may not be able to click on myself, but I can bring up my profile. So, we have profiles with, your social media linked in there and so on and so forth, and people can pick over that kind of thing. I think what I find interesting is that the way we try to bring people through particularly their first visit to a virtual world, where obviously, there's ample opportunity to be sort of nervous or overwhelmed by, a new UX, what's my camera doing, how do I get to the right place, kind of thing, all of which is, understandable considerations. We try to create, we work very hard on tools for the host. So I always think about, and these are old sort of analogies that Philip Rosedale and Corey and Drake, other people in the virtual world space used to talk about many years ago. But talk about running a virtual world as being rather like being a good cocktail party host, where you've got to have the ability to sort of gently lead someone by the elbow away from the the insurance bore who's cornered them by the fridge in the kitchen, and they're having a terrible time. You've got to be able to circulate people, move people around, and you've got to be a host where you can deliver a really kind of satisfying experience with very, very little effort required from the participants. And so we do that. I'm just going to drop an object in here that will show you using kind of like crowd control tools, where you can grab everybody and just move them to the auditorium, and they all get sat down and their camera is looking at the right thing. And then, you can click another button and they all get moved to 3 different breakout regions, or they get moved to, the next private meeting that they've logged into. You can see it's actually this tool chain here where you can see I can send everybody to the auditorium. Now I'm sitting down. Now I'm going to grab, there's only one person in here, but that person is my speaker. I move that speaker to the presentation stand, and now they can switch on their screen or whatever it may be. So these kinds of crowd management tools that allow an individual to be a host, so you can sort of sweep people through the experience without them ever getting worried about getting stuck behind oh no, I'm in the I'm stuck behind this rock, I can't get out, kind of thing. So that's the single biggest goal that we have is removing the friction from particularly a first person's visit, so they can be swept along, experience everything, experience presence with other people, without having to worry too much about getting themselves from point A to point B on their first visit.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Well, with with the minute or two that we have left, I'm going to turn the question to both of you: is what's next? What do we need to start thinking about from a decision maker perspective? Maybe I've never thought about the metaverse or virtual worlds as part of my everyday applications, but maybe I should. What's next, and what advice do you have for me?
Wagner, why don't you take that?
Yeah, I'd say start looking at what your staff is already using, because I can guarantee you most of them are already in some sort of 3D space and they're already playing around with it. And it might be worth thinking about setting up a sandbox for them to play around with and experiment. That's kind of how it started with Slack. It started bottom up, where people were playing around with this tool and sort of insisted that the management sort of accepted as a platform. And I think there's a lot of potential here to just do that, especially with people kind of in the 3D design space, or marketing and other places where visuals are really important. Is have this there. This is all integrated with Unity, so basically anyone with Unity, and a lot of companies, if not most companies, have someone that's fluent in Unity to start playing around with it and see what comes up. Just like any virtual world, but in a business context, the kind of things just emerge. Just from giving people different tool sets to create whatever they want. They start engaging with each other, and things start emerging, and it starts integrating with what they're working on. So like prototyping things, or what maybe Rohan could show you is there's a lot of 3D build parties where people will start creating objects and experiences that sort of reflect what they're talking about, and that creates visual references for people. So you're in a space and you actually have a 3D. Oh yeah, that's some of the things. And people just start creating, cool. Like they create kind of like a Japanese garden while they're talking. But something like this to play with, especially we're going to a hybrid model. I think we're not going all back to work. Kind of Apple's edict. You come in a few days out of the week to go into work, but you're going to be working online. So you kind of need a third space, perhaps, that sort of sits between Zoom and the brick and mortar office. So this is something to experiment with.
Wow. So many applications I can think of here. And Rohan, you want to share some closing thoughts with us?
Yeah, I think look, the key underlying trend here is away from a sort of there's a very major underlying trend taking place that is a consequence of ever growing bandwidth, memory, parallel processing power, and so on and so forth. And it is the pendulum swinging away from the first wave of what the internet did from say 95 to say 2010, whatever period you want to pick, where it was a pile them high, sell them cheap supermarket model that won, right? And we got lastminute.com and Amazon and lots of sort of aggregators, lots of value passed to consumers, lots of intermediaries taken out of the chain. But it was a massive, arguably history's biggest ever race to the bottom, right? And now what you're seeing is there's no more margin in selling pencil sharpeners on the internet, so Amazon has to invest in $15 million per hour period drama, right? Well, that is the beginning of the world's biggest flight to quality, right? But it's digital quality, it's digital luxury, it's environments like the ones that I've shown you. There we go. Mal Burns, who I think is in the audience, is just teleporting to this boardroom. And so, that flight to quality, it brings a whole new set of assumptions about how you engage with the technology and how you deal with the human scale of it. The people who we see succeeding with this technology understand that in a virtual world, when a person logs in, they're not just a number on a server anymore. They're actually somebody who's kind of living out part of their life in your hands. And so there is there's a weight to the approach you have to take that involves, facilities management and HR and people skills. And so that flight to quality as it moves into this enterprise space and opens the door for quality relationships, quality experiences, it'd be very interesting to see how that changes the thoughts of CIOs and senior people in technology who are used to thinking about everything as a commodity in some ways.
Yeah, because what we're really starting to approach now is not just technology. It's sort of this it's spatial experiences, and that requires its own form of artistry as well as vision. So this is just fascinating. I think we're going to have to continue this conversation because there's a lot more places that we can go, and I feel like there's an opportunity here for us to also build bridges for people who weren't thinking about this just 10, 15, 20 minutes ago, but need to. So I look forward to following up with you and looking for ways to explore some collaboration here in the near term. And I already have several ideas of ways that we can do that. So I want to say thank you very much for sharing this, for sharing your vision, sharing your experiences. Both of you gentlemen are clearly paving the way for the future. And James, I mean, I've known you for a long time, and you've always been ahead of this. And I feel like this is a real big moment for both of you. And so I'm here to support it any way I can.
Awesome.
Real pleasure. Always a pleasure to have the chance to talk about what you're passionate about to a group, particularly a knowledgeable group like yourselves. And so yeah, we would love to help you guys. If you want to do a show in World, you're welcome to do so. We had NASA, a senior NASA scientist coming in, giving a talk a couple of nights ago. I think it was last night on Mars. We had a Mars region up, and he talked about sort of isolation and remote working and those kinds of things astronauts experience. So if you guys wanted to do a live show in World, invite some people, we can get them pre-registered and have them come in and have a social event afterwards where they can meet some of your panelists. Then that's an easy thing for us to do.
Intersections Virtual World.
Yeah, actually, let's do that. And Gregarious, if you're listening, let's do that with an in-world show, but also bringing in Clubhouse so that we can bring Clubhouse to life in an entirely new dimension beyond voice. I think that would be extremely cool. There's a lot of other ideas that I have as well. So to be continued. Thank you again. We'll James, I'll just see you. I'll see you in DM.
Awesome. Let's talk.
All right, everybody. Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Hey.
Cheers.
See you all.
Wow. Well, we're 11 minutes over time, and I think you could see why. That was just incredible. I mean, yes, Dan, we're going to do it. We're going to bring Clubhouse to life in this virtual world. I think that's going to be so cool. A friend of mine, her name is Nicole. She did a real world Clubhouse event in Southern California in Los Angeles that looked very, very cool. And I think that I'm going to reach out to her as well to get involved to see if we can't create something outside of just intersections for this virtual world engagement. But I think there's real tremendous opportunities here. So Nicole, I'm going to follow up with you, and I'm going to send you this link so that you can watch bits of it, so that there's some meaning there. With that said, thank you very much to all of you for chiming in, for sharing your observations, for sharing your questions. This show is a community, which is why a virtual world is going to be so important to it. Also, Gregarious, I'm sure there's a lot of things that we could do. I was thinking about Jim Lauder back here with what he's doing at VidCon. In fact, I'll have to reach out to Jim. This is probably a topic we should have. James, I'll have to introduce you to him as well. With that said, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We're live every Thursday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific. You can go to intersectionslive.com to watch previous episodes, and I highly, highly suggest you do. Every show is fascinating. John, we missed you today. We'll both see you next week. In the meantime, reach out if you need anything. Take care.